A Sunday beef stew is one of the most simple and delicious recipes a home cook can make. But did you know the water is actually optional? We're making no water beef stew, which may sound impossible. However, this recipe gives us deliciously shreddable beef and comes with the most flavorful broth you've ever had. If you're curious where all this water is coming from, well then let me show you. First thing we're gonna do is grab ourselves our meat, which we have 2 pounds of beef chuck here. This is the ideal cut for stews because there's a lot of fat and collagen that's gonna slowly melt and give you that delicious tender beef. I'm also gonna grab a sheet pan and a wire rack, though the wire rack is optional if you don't have it. I'm gonna lay my beef on top of it and then we're gonna hit it with a ton of salt on all sides of it. We are doing a dry brine here, and really don't be scared to over season it because this is a big piece of meat and it's very hard to over season. So hit it on all sides and then we're gonna throw this in the fridge for ideally as long as you can. I left mine in the fridge for about 2 hours, and as you can see, it's dried up very nicely. The salt has dissolved and penetrated deep into the meat, seasoning it fully. Dry brining is the ultimate method to season your meat, but if you don't have the 2 hours to do it properly, don't worry, I'll show you where you should be seasoning it with salt if you want to do a quicker method. Oh, and I thought this clip was funny of me almost breaking a glass. Now to cut our steak, we're first gonna head on over to our oven and set it to broil at high heat. Make sure to dab off any excess moisture that's on or underneath the steak. And then from there, I'll next slice our steak into nice big chunky cubes, about 1 inch on each side. Try your best to cut them relatively the same size so that way they evenly cook through the whole process. Once you've sliced up your beef, we're now gonna move them on over to a bowl and then hit them with a generous amount of olive oil. And if you didn't dry brine them, this is where you should be sprinkling salt in there as well, just to season them properly. Now, after mixing all the olive oil with our beef, we're then gonna move them onto a sheet tray, making sure they're spread out nice and evenly, and we're gonna load them into the top tray of our oven to broil for about 10 to 15 minutes, just until we get a nice char and crust on the outside of them. This is my favorite method in browning a lot of beef all at once, and I learned it through Brian Lagerstrom, which if you guys don't know who he is, I don't know what you're doing watching me over him. In the meantime, we're gonna be chopping some of our veggies. So I'm gonna grab 1 white onion. Ideally, you want a yellow onion, but they only had white in the grocery store for some reason. I'm gonna peel off that outside layer, and then I'm gonna give it vertical cuts along the whole onion and just run my knife through it, chopping it into a nice medium-sized piece. Cut it at whatever size is most comfortable for you. Once you've moved the chopped onions into a bowl, we're gonna now grab 1 whole Napa cabbage. And this, surprisingly enough, is where the majority of our liquid's gonna be coming from for this stew. Napa cabbage has a super high water content, and when we cook it down, it's gonna pull that water out, and that is gonna be the foundation of this recipe. To cut this cabbage, we're just gonna stack all the leaves on top of each other, and then we're just gonna run our knife through it, giving it a nice little chopping, and we're gonna run our knife through it a few more times, breaking it down a little bit. It's gonna cook down a lot and shrink, but it's still a good idea to chop them into small, medium-sized pieces. And yes, I am using this whole head of cabbage, so prepare to have a lot of fiber in you very soon. Now, this is a lot of cabbage. Now, it was around this time that our beef should be done in the oven, and as you can see, they are beautifully seared. There's a nice crust all across that top layer of the beef. There's a beautiful Maillard reaction, giving an extra depth of flavor. And as you can see, a nice bit of liquid has come out of the beef as well, which we're gonna 100% incorporate into our stew. Once again, this is my favorite method to sear a lot of meat. There's no mess whatsoever, so shout out to Brian Lagerstrom again for showing it to me, or for posting it online. He didn't show it to me personally. I don't wanna be weird. Now I'm gonna head on over to our oven and set it to 300 degrees convection bake, and then I'm gonna grab our largest pot we have. So for me, it's a Dutch oven here. I'm gonna set it to medium-high heat and throw in half a stick of butter, or you could just use 2 to 3 tablespoons of olive oil if you prefer to use that. Once the butter is nicely melted, we're gonna toss in all of our chopped onions, and we're gonna hit it with a nice sprinkling of salt and just saute that for about a few minutes until it's nicely translucent. Once the onions are nicely translucent, we're then going to toss in all of our chopped chopped Napa cabbage. And once again, I emphasize you should be using the largest pot you have because this will be filled up entirely with cabbage. Now it may feel weird and look weird, but just trust the process. I promise it will work out. We're now gonna put our beef on top of the cabbage, pouring all that liquid as well. And now it especially feels and looks a little weird, but again, just trust the process. I promise it will work. I'm gonna close our pot up with our lid and I'm gonna throw it in the oven that's already been preheated to 300 degrees, convection bake for 30 minutes. After the first 30 minutes, we're gonna check on our pot. And as you can see, a lot of the cabbage has wilted down and shrunk a little bit. Not only that, if you mix it around, you'll see that there's a lot of liquid on the bottom of our pan, which is great. We're in the right direction. I'm gonna throw this pot back in the oven and we're gonna check it in about an hour. And in the meantime, we're gonna do a little bit of prep work. The first thing we're gonna cut are our potatoes. I have a little over a pound of gold potatoes here. I'm gonna first peel the outside layer, which is totally optional. If you don't wanna peel it, you don't have to, but I just think it's a little prettier. Once I have them fully peeled, I'm then gonna split them in half, cut them in half once again, and then run my knife through it, giving it some nice chunky pieces. Try to make all the pieces roughly the same size. I'm going for about like an inch here, maybe a little less. And if you're leaving your potatoes to sit on the counter, to prevent them from browning, pour some water in them to keep them submerged. Next, we're gonna grab about 5 carrots, and I'm also gonna peel these carrots as well, though again, totally optional. Once they're nicely peeled, I'm gonna cut off the ends, and then I'm gonna just rotate it and chop it and give us kind of like a diagonal cut. I think this is just a prettier way to cut carrots, but be careful because it is easier for them to slip and roll over your knife, so make sure your knife is super sharp and you have a good grip with them. Now our pot has been in the oven for a grand total of 90 minutes. I'm gonna crack open the lid and check on it, and as you can see, more liquid is now in the pot. There is obviously a ton of cabbage there, but if you stir it around, you'll see there's a lot of liquid as well. Now I'm gonna throw in our cut carrots as well as our potatoes, and I'm gonna give it a tablespoon of Better Than Bouillon beef base, just to boost the beef flavor. I'm gonna mix it all together, and you could really see this turning into a stew. And smell-wise, it's given off some of the best flavors I've ever experienced. I am gonna grab one piece of our beef just to test to see if it's starting to get a little tender, and as you can see, we still have some way to go. So I'm gonna put the lid back on it, and I'm gonna throw it back in our oven for about 45 minutes to probably about an hour. The amount of time it takes to make a braised beef that's tender and soft varies very drastically from batch to batch. Oh, and I forgot to mention, if you wanna throw any bay leaves or thyme in there, now's the time to do it. Time. I'm personally not doing it right now just because I just don't want to. I don't feel like picking out thyme stems or putting it in a little sash and throwing it in there. I just wanna make it easier. Okay, so our stew's been in the oven for about another hour. I'm gonna check on it, and as you can see, it's looking very much like a stew. There's a lot of liquid in there that we did not add into it at all, just from the cabbage. I'm gonna check the piece of meat now, and as you can see, it is now tender and easily shreddable. Now, if you like it to be crazy tender, I would leave it in there longer, but I still like it to have a little bit of a bite. I'm not a fan when it turns to mush the second you give any pressure to it. I like a little bit of that tension. So I would consider this right at that sweet spot where it's easily shreddable, but it still has a little structure to it. And if I check the potatoes, you can see that they've softened very nicely, and the carrots as well, very easily pierced with the fork. If we were to put the carrots and the potatoes in at the very beginning, they basically turn into mush at this point, so it's important you put them at the halfway mark. Now, this is when you should season it to taste with some salt, but I'm gonna be honest, it tastes phenomenal right at the get-go. Oh, wow, that tastes really good. Holy cow. Wow, okay, it's super light, but a little beefy, but it has a ton of flavor. It doesn't taste like cabbage, I guess, or maybe it does taste like cabbage, but I just didn't realize how good cabbage tastes. The last thing I'll do is toss in 1 1/4 cup of some frozen peas and mix that together while it's still hot. And now this is your no water beef stew. Has a ton of delicious complex flavors to it, and it has delicious meat that has a good bite, as well as the potatoes and the carrots. Taste-wise, this meal feels like just a warm hug. I absolutely love it. The idea that cabbage could be such a good substitute for water just blows my mind. Now, I will admit 2 things. I think it does need just a little bit more water in it. There's more in there than you would expect, but 1 to 2 more cups of water would just make the braising a lot easier and would just give you more liquid to work with when you're eating it. The other thing that I would say is I would recommend putting in a little bit more beef. I use a 2-pound piece of chuck roast, and I think you should do a 3-pound piece minimum, 4 pounds if you want want there to be a lot of beef in there. The beef flavor is there, but if it was a 3 to 4 pound piece, it would just be a little boosted up a little bit more. All in all though, I am super happy with this, and no water beef stew is just as possible and delicious as no water chicken soup. Speaking of no water chicken soup, if you want to check out that video next, I'll link it right here for you. Thank you so much for watching. Please hit the like and subscribe button. Have a wonderful rest of your day.